it is difficult to spot, and I think for the family there's not really physical signs. It's not like if you're an alcoholic you can visibly see it, or if someone's taking drugs you can tell, but it might be small changes in behaviour, staying out late, being a bit more antisocial, perhaps a few money issues, being a bit more irritable. Might not be gambling, but it's healthy to check whether it is.
And it's just instant, isn't it? As you say, watching a game, you get an advert on the TV, you get an advert on social media, and it's instant access. You don't have to leave the sofa and walk to a bookies. You just literally tap the button twice,
Yeah. I mean, you can do everything on your phone now. Within the past 5 or 6 years, you can run a business from it, you can do your shopping on it, you can record a podcast on it.
Yeah.
You can lose your life savings on betting through it if you want. It is that easy. And I think what we've always said is it shouldn't be.
Welcome to the Mentality Podcast. We're recording at the incredible Wheatwood Hall Hotel podcast studio. This is a podcast that goes way beyond stigma. We talk about men's mental health and mindset. We encourage the type of conversation that will open you up to another way to live life, another way to see yourself and the world around you. If you are ready for that, you're in the right place. I'm Stevie Ward and I'm an ex-professional rugby league player and captain, and now I guess I'm a bit of a podcaster, a speaker, actor, writer, entrepreneur. I'm still working all that out, but at Mentality we help men take control of their mindset by teaching them to find purpose, resilience, and what I believe is the new success: inner peace. That sounds good. If you are that guy who is waking up to the fact that they need to do something different in life and the same old habits aren't working for you, it might be time to step up. If you want to start your journey with us, you can go to mentality.co.uk/coaching to join the best team you have ever seen. Adam, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Good to have you. Good to have you here, mate. Do you want to start by just telling us why we're in this room and why we're having this interview, mate? Tell us a bit about yourself and what's led you to this position.
I guess lots of different things. Probably, I think one of the main connections will be through actually gambling and the mental health and effects linked to that, and gambling addiction in particular. Something that hit our family about 7 years ago, completely by surprise. And I'll definitely go into that and what we've actually done about that as a family since to try and make things better for ourselves and others. But yeah, lots to it. I mean, I've done a lot in and around Sheffield and also in other cities and countries for young people and around entrepreneurship, and lots of stories to tell, so hopefully we can get through a few of them.
Yeah, I think we will, mate. And I love how you were just saying then how it's a bit of a family job, bit of a family experience. We've got some of your family members with us today sitting in on the podcast, Evolve members. So I guess the one to go for then is just to see, how does your family story come into what's going on, into the gambling sort of situation?
So about 7 years back, really, my dad had said that he was going away for what he said was a training course related to his work, and he was going to be gone a few days, but he'd be coming back. This was initially something that he told us he was doing, and up until that point in our lives, we'd had a very normal family life, kind of pretty modest upbringing, everything was fine. Dad had a good job as an accountant. We had no worries at all. On one Thursday evening in 2014, his story changed from going on a training course to suddenly going to court. Now, my dad still didn't uncover the full extent of why he was going or what he was doing, but he said he was due in court, something to do with work, it's all fine. He was a bit nervous about telling us, but don't worry. The next day we were waiting for him to come home, he never got home. We actually got a call from a solicitor who said he was with my dad, and my dad had actually been given a jail sentence, and unfortunately he was in the back of a van on his way to prison. So that very day he'd been given a 2-year sentence, but we didn't know what for, we didn't know what he'd done. It must be pretty serious to have suddenly gone behind bars like that, and that we were to expect a short phone call from him when he reached prison. Well, as time evolved over the next few days, the local paper revealed that he'd been in court because he'd stolen quite a lot of money. He'd been gambling, he had a problem with gambling. And we discovered as a family that he'd gotten us into a lot of debt. He'd remortgaged the house, pretty much used any method available to keep betting, from payday loans to credit cards to anything you could think of, rational and irrational, he'd done to keep betting. And in time since, he said that addiction had probably been going on in the background for a long, long time. So, from one day everything being fine to all of a sudden our whole life being turned upside down by this hidden addiction that we knew nothing about.
Yeah, and like literally I had no idea of what was happening.
Nothing, not at all.
When's the moment that you found out then? Is that literally after the sentencing and all that had happened?
So after sentencing, when he was already in prison, I think the first time we found out the true extent of all of it was when we read it in the newspaper, and like in third person, someone was writing about this family, which, suddenly that was us.
I bet you couldn't believe it.
No, not at all.
Yeah. What was the journey then for your old man? What was your journey throughout that, and I guess how did it start and how did it roll on to?
I think he'd say that it started quite innocently, going to the slot machines, having the occasional bet, to probably having more bets than he should, but not really realising that it became one too many. I think in the early 2000s, like when online betting came and you could have it in your pocket all day, every day, that was the real downfall. And I think as he spent more, his finances got worse, and as his finances got worse, he bet more. And it was this like push and pull between, I've got no money, but I need more money, so I'll bet, but I've just lost more. And you then can't keep track. And I think it descended like that. He went into like a black hole, and he can't rationalise any of his thoughts. And I know a lot of other gamblers that we've heard from since have said, you've got no idea what you're doing. Like all of your rational thinking is gone because this addiction has psychologically taken you over. So I think quick descent into chaos, many years trying to fix it until stealing was the only option. And I guess prison was his safe place, a place where the gambling was gone. He didn't have to face his family head on. And he had space to think. And I know one of the things he said since being in prison is when he went to Gamblers Anonymous in the prison, that was the first time he ever recognised in himself that he'd had a problem with betting, and that it was that act of betting which had taken over his life. So completely life-defining moment, I think, for him. And for us as well.
So up until that point, it was like a blur then in terms of what was going on, the reaction, the coping mechanisms. And it took that sort of moment for Gamblers Anonymous to bring that out, I guess. And so what was your journey then? What was from the moment that you became aware of it and sort of understood it, or what was your journey to understand it, I guess?
Well, first of all, we didn't. You think, what did we miss? What could we have seen? Surely we should have noticed all this money disappearing or all his time spent on gambling, but you don't. Innocently, he could have been looking at his phone. Was he writing an email or was he betting? You can't tell, can you? So, there were a lot of questions we asked ourselves first. And we felt a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And I think, unfortunately, because it became public and everybody knew about it at the same time as we did, so we had to kind of heal very quickly. But we were really annoyed. We were angry. We didn't know what to do. I think a lot of people forget about the family when you talk about gambling addiction. They always think about, this poor individual who's got a problem. How do we help them? Well, we know that there's us, there's, me, my mum, my two brothers, the rest of the family, his employer, our friends, like all the knock-on effects of this one addiction is quite huge. So it took a family effort, I think, for us to get our head around what had happened first. To, I think, a lot of time trying to understand that. And Gamblers Anonymous did help because we met other people who had similar stories, and that kind of talk in therapy and being able to relate to somebody else who's been through it is really, really helpful. As I'm sure with lots of mental health, that's really important.
Yeah.
And then we had to make a decision. Do we bring him back into our lives and support him and get over this? Or do we say, do you know what, it's too much, go on your own journey? But I think bravely, with the help of my mum, we took the decision to bring him back home and give him a second chance when he came out of prison. And that story was the inspiration for a campaign that me and my dad led for several years to influence the industry to change the way it behaves and look at how addictive it is, but also to bring about more support for people like us. We were just an ordinary family who this addiction had crept up on, and we had no way of knowing it was going to come. What do you do in that situation? So we moved on to actually work with the gambling industry in recent years to develop an app based on our own experiences called BetProtect. And it really is just a safe place. It's, like you'll have a running app on your phone and it will guide you through how to do your fitness in the morning. This is guiding you through how to get your betting under control, but integrated into the gambling industry. That's what we did. The app recently got acquired last month or 2 months ago and is set to be rolled out across the industry. So really proud of that. And I think it's only through the strength of the family and my dad being so open about what he did that meant, I think that's a lesson in trauma and mental health for anybody. If you can get that courage to actually come out and just talk about it, you'd be surprised at what happens. So we've been on like a complete roller coaster with it, but I hope that what we've done has created some change. So
mate, it's enormous. It's enormous. I think the weight of what you've all taken on, as a family. And I was listening to something earlier, and I love the mental skills or the mental gymnastics you can do in life, and I think that's why we exist, to try and promote that and share it and get it out there so people can do exactly the exercise that you guys have done. Like whenever you're angry in life and whenever you're feeling down or whether you're feeling anxious or fearful about something, there's an option, of either accepting it and moving on, doing something different, or realizing what you can do despite it, And I think, you guys are an amazing example of that. You've not just took an immense sort of trauma, like you say, to happen and just reacted from it and moved away from it. You've faced it and you've turned it into something that can help people and help other lives that have been disrupted. When was that feeling that you got for yourself? Is it a chain of events for you, or is there a moment where you thought, no, I'm not running away from this, I'm doing something about it?
It was kind of a natural reaction and not planned. So never did I think that we would be, taking on the big betting companies or that, anything really. All that happened was we started talking about it and said, look, there must be other people like us. Let's see where it goes. And then I think within a few months, even before my dad got out of prison, we were already sat in front of a national campaign where politicians had picked it up and we were being asked to talk about it in lots of different places. And it seemed to work, and I think the only reason it did work is because we didn't really have an agenda apart from to make a difference. And I think we'll never lose that, in that all this is two people who went through something and said, look, we realise there's a gap. No one was there to help us, so let's be that, people who have been down that path before to help others, and that's got us here magically. And I think the strength we've gotten from doing that as a family, and what we hear from people, when they get in touch and say, thank you for saying that, that's really made a difference to me, or they say, I really resonate with that you said, can you help me? Can you give me some advice? Is a really good feeling. So, yeah, that kept us going.
And like, from your understanding then, what does a gambler's mind look like? Like, what is that to you, and how does that mind work?
I don't know. But from what I've seen and what we know, like from the research, gambling, like any other addictive thing, creates an endorphin effect in your brain. So you get this massive high, can be followed by a massive low, and it does in effect just mess with the wiring in your brain and puts you in a position where you can make decisions that you're either not conscious of, or you're not making an informed decision, or just irrational things. And
like in the moment
it must be a mess. I mean, if you ask my dad, he will say, I don't know. The memory's not there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it must be chaos at the time when you're going through it. And if you think of that in terms of mental health, that must be really destructive. So, yeah.
100%, yeah. And so what does the app look like then? Like, what is the infrastructure of the app, and how does it help people?
So it's quite calming. It's designed to be educational. It's got a mix of videos, other people's stories, podcasts, even just really simple exercises you can do to just check your own gambling and check your perception of your gambling as well. So we're not trying to tell people don't bet, and we're not trying to force people to get straight into therapy if they're not ready. So the idea is just to nudge people's behaviour a little bit towards being safe, and just prompt a few extra thoughts that they may not have had before. So yeah, it's all built around other people's experiences, and we've had leading therapists and designers involved in it from this country and abroad. So it's been quite a big project, to be honest.
It sounds amazing. It sounds like one of those projects which is so worthwhile, like you say.
Yeah.
It's from a good place. What does the discussion look like, and how you approach these leading betting companies? Like, how was all that gone, and how did that look?
I think we're glad that the industry stepped forward. I think if we were sat here 7 years ago when my dad was in prison, I think the response would have been very different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people now who have come forward. I mean, we've seen, another sports player this week talk about his experience of gambling on national TV.
Yeah.
We've got so much more awareness of it now that there's nowhere for the companies to really hide apart from to say, look, we've got to do all that we can. And I think, if I was, as a business person that I am, selling a product that had an adverse effect on someone, I would want to do all that I can as well.
Yeah.
And I think what we've managed to do just by being authentic and relentless is show them that the problem won't go away. So they've had to take steps to do things. So there's really no magic formula to how we came to work with the industry, or not even that we preferred it, to be honest. We could have just been a charity and independently funded, and I don't think we'd have got as far as fast. But I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, and how are they supporting it now then? What does that look like?
So like I mentioned, in summer the app got acquired. So we're actually winding down our company now. We've effectively sold it to a company who were going to roll it out across the industry, because I think for us, we've always had this kind of check on ourselves, and I think it might be a good thing for your listeners to think about as well, in terms of like where you want to start and end things. And I think we've always been quite cautious, so we don't want gambling to completely consume our family. I didn't particularly want to become known as the gambling person, and I didn't particularly want my dad to become known as, oh, that's him who had that gambling addiction. So I think we realised that after we'd built it, the best people to take it on are the industry themselves. So that's why we let them acquire it, and that does really good things for us, but it also means that the product is in the hands of people who can integrate it into their technology. We can't do that. So my dad sits on the board of the company now called Crucial Compliance, who have taken it from us. And for me, I'm going to take a step back and focus on all my other work. So
yeah. And what is all the other work that you're on with?
Quite a varied amount of stuff, but I do a lot with young people. So together with my brother and a few other colleagues, we've got a consultancy that works with charities, and we work with social enterprises, community projects to help them get their brand out there. And then on the flip side of that, we have our own non-profit that works across Africa, other countries, to give young people a chance to set up in business, make a bit of money and make a better life for themselves. So I'm going to go back into that, take a break from the gambling.
Yeah. And how did you make the decision then to take that break? Like, was it a family discussion
from the gambling?
Yeah.
Really, because it was being sold, and like I said, for me, I felt that's my role done now.
Yeah.
I've brought the issue to the public's attention. We've made a difference. We've got a product there now. My dad is going to obviously be on the board, so he's going to see it in the right direction. Yeah. And, what more can I do? That I think that's a good chapter for me to say I've done my bit for that. And it is quite stressful as well. I wouldn't sit here and say, look, trying to campaign against an industry that makes billions of pounds every year is particularly easy. Yeah. And the amount of abuse and stuff we've had thrown at us for doing it is quite a lot. I could give you a book full of tweets and things that we've had. I'm sure you've seen it yourself in occasion, that people don't realise that even one tweet, you can hide the notification, but I bet you one day you've turned your Twitter back on and seen it and thought, this stuff is ridiculous. So I'm very conscious that it's been a very busy campaign.
Would that just be from like members of the public then that disapprove of?
Yeah. I mean, people who bet regularly and think you're taking their hobby away, or staff in the betting shops who think that you've taken their jobs off them, or even nastier trolls and things like that. But you learn to kind of rise above all that, I think, and become stronger.
Yeah, there's a balance in life, I guess, isn't there? Which I think in life, we're doing it on every subject at the minute. We swing into the absolutes, and I don't think what you're saying is betting should be completely null and taken away, because that's just never going to happen. It's in human condition. But yeah, there's got to be a balance, and there's got to be a way to measure it and to be safe with it 100%.
That's it.
So like this sort of entrepreneurial spirit and this like endeavour to change stuff and make things better, where do you think that came from for you?
My earliest memory of it probably came from when I was about 11, 12. I got diagnosed with Asperger's, a form of autism.
Yeah.
And at that very point, I remember the difficulty in school before it, and also for some time after it, due to lack of understanding, people's attitudes. But also, I think, a realisation that everything's not equal for everyone in the world. And if, for instance, I'm in a position where I've got some experience, or I've got a vision or an insight that perhaps you don't have, what's the reason I can't pass that on to you?
Yeah.
Believe that we can all do better together rather than fighting against each other. I've not yet met a politician who agrees with that, but let's see whether we can change that over time.
Yeah.
But I've seen the effect where if you take a second to stop and say, look, what can I do from where I am to make either life better for somebody else, or create an opportunity where there wasn't one before, it always pays you back. And I think it's quite a good philosophy to have on life, that you look at what good you can do and what value you can create, and then as a business person, that's how we get clients and how we make a difference. But also it means I've got a skill set where I can, if I want to go and support people with disability, I've got some experience and I can try and help with that. Or whether it's gambling, how can we transform that bad experience into something better for others? And I think if we all did a bit of that, we might not have as many problems in the world. But that's just a bigger vision.
Yeah, it's a good vision to have as well. It's a great vision to have. And like, what are the challenges that you found along the way with that? Because people can get lost along the way. People can get swayed and persuaded and distracted, I guess, away from what they want to do. Like, what's the challenges that you've had since that, that realisation and diagnosis, I guess, of Asperger's?
Well, autism in itself, I think, brings its own unique challenges. If you've got any disability or any kind of condition, I think the first thing you have to battle is the stigma So you've immediately been given this label, and how do you get past that to start with, and get people to see beyond it? But then secondly, having the self-confidence, I think, and like determination to keep going, because I think it's fair to say if you've got any striking point of difference between you and the next person, you'll self-doubt yourself a lot more than, I dare say, normal or mainstream people do.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to fight because we live in a very populist society. It's based on how many likes you get on Instagram, how many friends you've got, how popular you are, whether you fit in as part of a group. And we know from past that, you know, some of the most successful and impactful people in the world completely didn't fit any of those characteristics at all. So what's the problem with being autistic or having problems with your mental health? It's something that we're all going to experience something at some point, so let's just get on with it and stop having a go at each other. So I think I've had to learn that mindset and practice it a lot, and you know, sometimes be very tough in the face of people and things that are designed to get in the way or just simply don't understand.
Yeah.
So that's a really big thing.
Yeah, it's pretty lonely, can't it? If you're seeing a world that's different to what the popular is, you know, and you're seeing through it, I can imagine that's but that's challenging in itself. And then you've got to have the courage to back it up and to pursue it and to roll with it instead of trying to blend in and fit in. Which, like you say, I think a lot of the great sort of leaders and people that have really made impact is the ones that sort of stick away from that sway, from that sort of pull, if you like. Yeah, and so like, what do you see you going on to next? What's your purpose going forward then?
Well, I think growing that agency I've got and being able to impact people through that. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I think I'm just going to let opportunities come and speak for the people that I work for and represent them well and just see how it goes, to be honest. No pressure on myself to do a certain thing. And I think that's another thing, you know, you get pressured from a very young to work everything out.
Yeah.
So, you know, from about age 12 is what subject do you want to do at school? What do you want to do at college? What do you want to study at uni? What job are you going to get? The reality is most people don't know.
And quite a young age, isn't it?
End up the amount of people who have got a degree in one thing and go on to do something completely else. So I don't know, actually, what I'll do next, apart from keep doing what I am doing. And I know I'm happy with that. And that's quite comfortable for my mental health as well.
Yeah.
To not put that pressure on myself.
Yeah. When I started Mentality 5 years ago, I was committed to creating a hub that would offer the knowledge and experiences to allow all of us to go beyond the stigma that cripples many men into a life lacking fulfillment. It would be a lie to say that I knew the impact Mentality would be having on people's lives, but we are. And it blows me away when someone gets in touch to share with us how we've helped them. So, today's podcast sponsor is Mentality Counselling, and I want to share with you a testimony from a guy who went from listening to this exact pod to making the important step to start counselling. Just wait until you hear what he has to say about his experience. If you are someone who this resonates with and you are ready to get the help that you deserve, head to our website right now and get in touch with John. I found it almost impossible to share my feelings and emotions with others. This was evident in our first few sessions. John was patient with me, providing support and guidance, but also gave me the necessary push when I needed it. Our sessions have changed my life. I now use my feelings and emotions to my advantage rather than letting them control my life. John has given me the tools to continue to improve outside of our session, and I am so much happier now. And we've been talking, Adam, for a while, obviously, about your story, about your family's sort of shift and the way they've picked things up and changed, and your old man's here.
Yeah.
Can we pull him in, or?
You can,
Only because I know you said he's been a campaign and he's been campaigning. Can we ask about your journey and how you've seen the last few years. I'll have to swing my mic right over to you.
I'll just stand here. I'm not going to sing though.
That's after that.
Well, that's how you empty the room.
Yeah, I've been there before. So yeah, like obviously with Adam's experience and you, I was like asking like the questions, which obviously acknowledging you're in the room, and like what's it been for you, this whole experience, this journey?
Full of surprises, I think is the thing to say. First of all, that I was taken back into the family full and therefore still had a life and a purpose. I think the recognition people should have is that the people I hurt the most were the people that helped me the most, which is my family. It shouldn't be like that, I don't think. That's where we came from, the lack of support for families. It's an enormous gap. For me, I think it came out that I have forgotten more than I remember, but the evidence is there, so I can't really contradict it. But Adam's tenacity and strength of purpose has dragged me along into places I'd never want to be, just in my normal life, never mind in this journey that we're on now. And the journey will continue because it's embedded in our DNA now. We started off by saying if we only help one person, then that's good enough for us. That's I think we've helped more people than that, but we don't go around measuring it. We're not into that number game. Where I've ended up now through the sale of the business is that I can still influence where that product goes and in what, that it's not misused. It's not a product that's going to be there for profit. It'll be at cost. And the reason for that is we want it in the marketplace as quickly as possible to help as many people as possible. And that's international as well as local. So I said, all the surprises are that we've managed to do something. It's taken off. The industry recognise us and the product, and we have an amount of success through getting the respect of the industry, although it's an industry that still, in my view, is not willing to own up bad news that goes with people that are getting to an addictive stage, and they should be wading in there with all their army of help rather than turning the other way.
Obviously, Adam mentioned about the progress and the journey that you went on, and mentioned that the time that you sort of realised and had the realisation was when you were in Gamblers Anonymous in prison. Could you sort of like paint the picture for what that journey was like from going to court and then going through that process?
So there's certain few things that the regime had pinpointed and labelled me, if you like, as somebody that's probably got a gambling problem. And every week they had a couple of hour session within the prison for people to attend, and it was a couple of representatives from Gamblers Anonymous that turned up quite bravely, I thought, and in being able to have an almost one-to-one with someone about that particular subject, burst open where I was at, which was still until that point in time deluded and deceptive of myself as well as others. That was a breakthrough, but then it became mundane as well, if it can be straightforward. Gambling Anonymous has only got so much it can give, and then you've got to take your own route. And as I said, that's a lot easier when you've got your family behind you. Clean my act up and realise where I'm at. So I suppose 7 years has passed and I've not had a bet once since, as far as I can remember.
Wow.
And it's not hard work. I think as well though, what the big danger is if you just falter once, it's easier to falter twice and then three times and you're back on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
I always thought I had financial problems that could be solved by gambling. And now I'm of the opinion that I had gambling problems first and foremost, and the financial problems were because of the gambling.
Yeah.
So it was a turnaround in thought.
And so like after that realisation with Gamblers Anonymous, what was your own route that you went on?
You're asking me to assemble my life that I've tried to forget. But out of prison, visits to Gamblers Anonymous locally, feeling guilty that I didn't think I was getting much out of that, but continued with it. It was an arena which allowed you to think more directly, but there had to be something else for me, probably to and the liaison and joining up with Adam on what we've gone out and proven can be done. That was what came out for me.
How's the relationship between you and Adam evolved then over time?
He's just an older pain in the neck.
That's a byproduct, isn't it?
Yeah. The pressure on Adam has been greater than on myself, because the expectation of him is that he can overachieve on everything he does, and therefore what a burden to give somebody. He took it in his stride. So that's amazing.
Thanks, mate. Sorry I've pulled you in there, but why not? Why not?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, thanks very much for that. I'm gonna ask you actually about the Paul Merson documentary, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well done to him for doing it. It can't have been easy. I think it just shows, doesn't it, that gambling addiction doesn't discriminate, whether you're an accountant from a Sheffield or you're a multimillionaire footballer. It's not about who you are or how much you've got. It's a really addictive and potentially dangerous thing. And I'm glad that it got that level of awareness. I hope it makes a difference. I hope the industry has a look. I hope that the government has a look. I hope that families, like if they listen to us, might see a bit of it in themselves and think, I need to get that checked, or I need to have a look at my gambling.
What do we need to check? What do we need to pinpoint? If there's someone listening to this now who, like your old man, sort of wasn't quite registering it until it was too late in a sense, what is that can be pinpointed? Yeah,
I mean, it is difficult to spot, and I think for the family, there's not really physical signs. It's not like, if you're an alcoholic, you can visibly see it.
Yeah.
Or if someone's taking drugs, you can tell. Yeah. But it might be small changes in behaviour, staying out late, being a bit more antisocial, perhaps a few money issues, being a bit more irritable.
Yeah.
Might not be gambling, but it's healthy to check whether it is.
Yeah. And like, so within the app and how you've progressed, what are the regulations that you guys want putting in?
Gosh, it's been a long time since we talked about that. I think less advertising, particularly when it's in places that young people can see it. So the amount of, gamblification of football on the shirts, around the pitch, before and after the game, on social media, I think we can tame that down a bit.
It's seamless, isn't it, really, when you think about the advertising, especially on social media.
It is scary, the amount that there is.
And it's just instant, isn't it? As you say, watching a game, you get an advert on the TV, you get an advert on social media, and it's instant access. You don't have to leave the sofa and walk to a bookies. You just literally tap the button twice,
Yeah. I mean, you can do everything on your phone now. Within the past 5 or 6 years, you can run a business from it. You can do your shopping on it. You can record a podcast on it.
Yeah.
You can lose your life savings on betting through it if you want. It is that easy. And I think what we've always said is it shouldn't be. So the regulatory framework is there in this country that your spend should be checked. If you went and paid £100,000 into the bank, I guarantee you someone at the bank will say, where did that money come from?
Yeah.
In cases like my dad's, he stole 53 grand and spent that on gambling, but nobody checked. And it's things like that where we can see markers of a problem. And as a regulated industry, I think the industry can do a lot more to look at the people who are betting and how they're betting and what they're spending. Because if the technology is there to build a therapy app, the technology is there to look at what we're spending, and we know it is. So our message to the industry has always been just use it. You'd save yourself a hell of a lot of trouble, and you'd save families a hell of a lot of trouble.
Well, the technology's definitely there. I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about AI and sort of that being the secret sort of pandemic that's ongoing. And I think it was saying by 2045 we'll have AI that's 1 billion times smarter than a human being.
That's scary.
Which is scary. So you rewind back to 2021, and you think that these markers and these sort of red flags, with what we've got at the minute, the amount of technology that we've got at the minute, I guess you guys are trying to, swing the momentum or push it towards actual physical, real benefits, and not just being pulled into the matrix to lose the money and to exercise a habit, which is so easily done. The advertising thing's big for me, how it's directed, what people see from it, and the people that are readily able to see it. Is that something that within the app or within this sort of app that you've just sold, is the education, the knowledge around that for what to steer away from, is that on it as well?
Yeah. That is the heart of it.
Yeah.
Really just to educate the player and say, look, these are the signs you could be having a problem with this, or, self-check tools and other people's stories, and to get them to understand the psychology of it as well. Because, if you ask someone about becoming addicted to, I don't know, fizzy drinks or unhealthy food, people will understand how that becomes a problem, but people don't understand how gambling becomes a problem. So there's a need there, and we're just simply filling it with education.
Yeah.
And we don't tell our story to scare people away from gambling. It's more to say, we're at the very extreme end of it, but we don't want there to be another dad sat there having to go to the lengths he did to keep it all going. So, it's very much about prevention.
Yeah. What was like the initial fallout that you guys had then? So when your old man, when obviously, that trauma happened, what was the fallout from that for physically for your family?
What happened?
Yeah, like how did you manage the situation? What did you go to manage it?
Well,
was there anything to help you manage it?
No, not really. Apart from, I think, the people sat here and a few people at home. No. We went to the usual places you'd probably ring up for help. But, even today, if you walk into your GP surgery and say, I've got a problem with gambling, they'll probably have to go and Google and find out what to do. So we're still at that level in terms of this problem. So there's a long way to go for that. But I think it was just getting that inner strength and, realising, look, we can get over it. We need to figure it out. We need to get over the natural grief that we had, a lot of that, particularly my mum as well. It came as a massive shock. And I think if we hadn't have kept going and we'd stopped or let it take us over, then we wouldn't be doing this at all. So there's something in that about being focused. You can have the emotion, we all have it. So, we were really upset and we were really angry, and it took a long time for us to be able to speak like we do now.
Yeah.
But I think it's because the attitude we took was that we're going to understand this and we're going to get to the bottom of it, rather than either turn our back on it and run away from it, or do what arguably could have been a lot easier and just let it take over our whole lives. So it sounds really sensible now looking back at it, but when we were doing it, there were good days and bad days, and there were really bad days and really, really bad days. And there's no cure for that. There's nothing apart from therapy and talking and having good people around and taking a breath that can help you get through that time. And people who, even if they don't understand, try to understand.
Yeah.
With your podcast, I'm sure you've met a lot of people who talk about mental health and other problems who will say, the amount of people who just don't understand, and it can be really frustrating, and that actually sends you backwards in your own recovery. Like, we've all been on a recovery as a family, like the affected others, from the trauma. And how do you get back to a semi-normal life when the whole world knows your dad's a criminal? You've lost a hell of a lot of money that you didn't think you lost, and you've got to think about everybody's fragile state. It's quite a lot. So yeah, there's no handbook for it, and I think for me, being okay with the fact that there's no perfect way to deal with it is the silver lining.
Yeah.
So I would also, and I always do, commend when there's podcasts like this that people like you set up, because there's a piece of us in you as well. And I think when we all come together and just talk about what we've been through on a just very human level, no agenda, just conversation, someone will listen and hear the words.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been able to do that.
Yeah, mate, it's a massive credit to yourself, spearheading this and just literally like stepping into for the transformation completely. And obviously your family, like, you talk about resilience and you talk about like meeting challenges, but not saying it's been easy and it's been like straightforward, but you've worked through such a lot there. I know Chris is on Zoom, so I was just mugging off AI and all this sort of stuff, and now we're going to get someone asking a question from 20 miles away or something like that.
Yeah, so firstly, just echo what Steve said. I think it's amazing what you've done, Adam. I wanted to ask a question about the industry and how willing it is to change. Like, I think you said you've had like meetings with people in the industry on the gambling side. And I know the Paul Merson documentary kind of showed how they use their algorithms and data. I think they even classed one customer as a win back, referring to the fact that he'll try and win back his losses. And people betting 80 times a day. It's built into the profit model to kind of extract as much as they can out of customers. So it's very hard when organisations, what you're trying to implement will impact their profits. But do you think it will come from them, or do you think government has to be the hard hammer to really force it on them?
Yeah, I'm sure that question will be the subject of somebody's master's degree thesis in a few years' time. It's like chicken and egg question, isn't it? I think the problem with the industry is it's a multi-billion-pound industry, and it's like taking on tobacco or alcohol. So many people do it and have a good time with it, and it's not a problem, and we don't want to stop that for them. That's kind of point number one. I think with the industry itself, I'm sure if you had anyone from the industry sat here, they would say that there's a really dirty underbelly in the industry that needs to go now, because it has become a problem for too many, and some of the bad practice is definitely getting exposed. So I think that holding them to account is a really good thing, and it's great that in this country we can. In terms of government, yes, it does need to be stronger and have more teeth. The problem we've got, though, is balancing that with the tax that the Treasury gets from the industry, and that's always been the age-old problem. How do we balance a socially acceptable and responsible gambling industry with a conservative, money-focused, growth-focused outlook? And I think the truth is there'll never be the right balance, and we are still, unfortunately, going to have to accept that we're going to see stories like ours coming out again and again, but it can't take too many before the government will be forced to take some more draconian measures. And I'm sure, speaking for both sides, the industry don't want that, because that really will damage their profits. So I think the only choice is to get clean, but my sincere hope is they don't just do that to look good. They take things that we say seriously, and that they recognise that things can be implemented. In the short term, it might hit their profit and they might need to invest in it. But longer term, at least they'll know that the customers they do keep are definitely not having a problem. So if they have that kind of sensible head on them to think like that, I hope they do. Like I said, really tricky balance though.
Yeah.
Just to ask it a different way, say tomorrow morning you're announced as Prime Minister. What do you think gambling looks like in the country that you're in charge of? Because you said you don't want it completely got rid of. And look, I'm someone who quite enjoys a bet now and again, but just like a tenner on a game I might be going to, and it's never been a problem. And quite a few of my friends, similar. We're kind of it's more just like a hobby every now and again. So I don't want it cancelled, but then I don't want stories like your family's story to happen. So yeah, you're Prime Minister tomorrow morning. What does the gambling look like in the country?
I mean, not too different to how it looks today. Still freely available. Certainly none of it banned. I actually personally don't think setting stake limits across online gambling and other products is necessarily the right way to go. I think that's going to potentially cause more trouble. But I think a reduction in advertising, in the same way we've done with smoking and alcohol, is a very safe thing to do. And I think evidence supports it. I think having upfront spend limits imposed on everyone until you can prove you can afford it might be the right way to go. And using technology for the better. So using those algorithms to look at someone who might be spending more and more and more, or someone who suddenly comes and has a binge at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure if it was my gambling company, I would be worried about that. But I think enacting perhaps a different way to some of the companies in the past. But I would make that level of responsibility at a much greater cost to the company. So just as an example, at the moment, if a company fell foul of any of those measures, they would be investigated, they'd have a chance to improve, they'd put in some remedial measures, and if they were still pretty bad, they'd get a fine. And I've always said that a fine is not the answer to the problem. They need to be threatened with having their licenses pulled, because that's the only way you're going to pull the industry into line, to tell them you're not going to be able to trade if you keep doing it in this way. And, you know, a couple of £1 million is nothing to a multi-billion-pound gambling operator, you know. They can easily throw that away if they make a few mistakes. They've had a few binge gamblers out of it. That's me being a bit more cynical, but yeah, I would put it at a much higher cost to the company. If I make a mistake with my taxes, HMRC are not going to give me a second chance. But for whatever reason, in the gambling industry, if you let 50 grand of stolen money like my dad's go through, you might just get a slap on the wrist. So yeah, I would make it much tougher.
And just back onto the app then, when you said it's with the industry now, does that mean that they will promote it? So say when you download a gambling app on your phone, will this be something that they say, are you also interested in? Or is it something that if there are any problem behaviours, they'll refer you to the app? Or how will that work?
Yeah, both.
Oh, cool.
So we've got companies speaking to us now who will integrate it into what they already do, so it will be seamless, or others who might offer it as an extra. To be honest, at this point in time, either is good. The more help, the better. So, yeah, we've got a healthy selection of companies on board in this country and, like my dad said, internationally. So, yeah, we hope that this kind of thing becomes a bit more of the norm.
And these are the big players, I guess. Like I'm sure you might not be able to name them yet, but I mean, these are ones, the household names we've heard of are involved as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. One other question I was going to ask. You mentioned Asperger's, and you mentioned kind of stigma and misconceptions. What are the main kind of misconceptions that you think the wider public and people have around it?
Autistic people can't have friends. Autistic people don't know how to talk to people. Come and listen to this podcast for proof that they can. Also, I think that every autistic person's Rain Man. They're not all kind of able to memorize, you know, the Statue of Liberty and recreate it after looking at it for 2 seconds and draw it. There's differences and levels to it, and I think it affects people in different ways. But also to respect that different people have different coping strategies as well. So if I need to spend 6 hours on a walk listening to music to, you know, calm down after what for me was a really stressful week, some people might see that as antisocial or something else, but, you know, somebody else might cope in a different way. To be honest, just recognizing that everybody's different at the end of the day. But yeah, autism is certainly not kind of a one-size-fits-all thing. You know, we say that about so many different disabilities and, you know, conditions of sorts. But yeah, I think that's been the main thing for me. And just, you know, it's the same model as what we did with the gambling. And, you know, just talking about it and getting people to understand it and being a good ambassador for it. You know, it's not about being a famous speaker or anything like that, but it's about just creating better life and pathways for others. So, yeah.
And now I've announced you as Prime Minister tomorrow. I just wondered if there are things you'd like to do in your 4 years in charge.
Change the education system, I think, would be one. bring more real life stories and people. You know, I think if kids had the opportunity to sit in on a podcast like this and see someone who's been in sport, someone who's been secondhand through addiction, and get that level of experience into schools rather than textbooks and exams. I didn't go to uni myself, so I'm quite biased, but I've learned more in the real world by making mistakes and having good people around who I can talk to and give me advice than I think I learned in any of my time in school. And that's not to criticise the system. I just think we've got a lot of updating to do in the system that we have got, and there's a lot of people who can help. Yeah, that's the only thing that comes into my head.
You've got my vote, mate, anyway.
Great, see you tomorrow.
Are we doing it for real?
There's a question in the chat, so I don't know if you want to read it out.
The app offers mindfulness lessons. What do they look like, and what is your relationship to mindfulness in your own life?
Yeah, so some of the content comes from outside specialists. So my honest answer to the question is I'm not a mindfulness specialist. My relationship with it should be a lot better, I think. I get kind of quite engrossed into my work, and I'm happy with that, but I know it's not always healthy. Yeah, in the app, the mindfulness exercises have come from a specialist therapy organisation. So it's things like things to listen to or exercises you can do on your own. You can reflect on them in the app itself and make a diary. So these are evidence-based therapy. Like we're really, like I said, just two people who experienced a problem and brought together the experts to build this solution. So yeah, there's a variety of them in the app. As for my relationship with mindfulness, could be better.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to Chris's question, and you were talking about the Asperger's and misconceptions and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm using that as a pre-context, but I want to understand what your perception is of yourself for how you're different. And it doesn't have to be Asperger's. It doesn't have to, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you feel like you see the world and operate in your perception, I guess?
Good question. So my cynical perception of me would be very quick to see all the problems with it. Probably because I do very quickly analyse stuff, and I'm quite quick to learn. So I know that about myself. I can get very hyper focused. Usually quite quiet until you get to know me a bit more. They're the main differences, I think. Sometimes they can display themselves a bit more. But, I mean, generally, I think nowadays I do a lot less thinking before I act, so I just get on with stuff and get things done. Sometimes that can be a shock to people. They're not quite ready for that, but I'm quite happy for them to catch up.
So, there'd be a tendency for you to quite analyse stuff, but, you've got better at just going and doing it.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a good lesson, I think, for me anyway. I think that's something that you get better as you get older, don't you? Cool. Chris, good with that?
Yeah, I've got a question for you to your dad, if that's all right. I guess if there are any of our listeners who perhaps are kind of in the grips of the gambling problem at the moment, what would your kind of top tips or advice be? And I guess another way of asking it would be, say if you could go back and give yourself a few top tips the year before you were arrested and went to jail for it, what would they be? Are there any things that have helped you since?
Top tips. That sounds like success driven, but that's not me. The comedian in me says don't get caught, but in itself that is the answer, actually, to be able to identify what it is that's your problem. I was under the weight of delusion and deception and things like that, and you've got to find what it is that you've been, where these characteristics come from. What's the motivator? I mean, in the industry of environment, they have things that say when things get sort of tough, stop. I looked at those and thought, no, that's not for me. I have no problems. I think, though, if you ever get an inkling that you have got a problem, just go and see somebody and talk it out and see whether it's there or not.
Yeah. What was the worst moment for you then in the journey?
Going into prison, and that whole experience was, not recommended. Not knowing where to start once I came back out of prison, even though we got a mission in a sense, selfishly, I was just thinking about myself and where am I going from here. So that was very difficult. And in fact, if I hadn't have had Adam dragging me along into areas that I never thought I would be, and talking to 11 million people on breakfast TV and stuff like that, that is not me. So I had to be somebody else.
And you speak about identifying the motivator. Did you identify the motivator for yourself?
It kind of exposed itself. It was, semantics. Yeah, in prison, GA meetings opened my eyes to myself. I then took on counselling within the prison as well. It's a funny place, but prison is very levelling, and the people that I mixed with, I know they had problems, obviously, because so I was in the same place, but many of them just seemed to need some coaching, some hugging, something just to get back on your feet and become a person in the whole wide world. Just be somebody.
Cool. Any more, Chris, that you can think of?
No, I guess just a message to anyone who is listening and feels like maybe this podcast or conversation has kind of raised a few flags in their own life to check out the BetProtect app. So yeah, Adam, if you could point people in the right direction for any of the social media handles or website.
Yeah, and just a message for Adam, for yourself, for everyone here, that I feel quite humbled and grateful that we're getting to share this message. And as you say, Adam, to have this conversation and just air it out, just give it organically out there and hope that people listening can. I think the big message is to identify it, to identify that before it gets too late, and in your sense and your family sense, it's not too late because you're pushing the message and you're doing something really productive. But on both the side of the vehicle that the gambling world is, and then in ourselves, why it leads us to it, why we choose to do it, and why we get into that habit and why we get caught up in it. I think there's a lot of reflection there to do, and I think it's very worthwhile, as we've seen just by having this conversation and you guys here. So thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Adam, let's steal that microphone again off your man and tell us where we can find you, mate, and where we can keep in touch with you and where the Mentality listeners can find you.
The BetProtect app is a good place to start for anybody who needs support with gambling. So just betprotect.co.uk or on Twitter at BetProtectApp. I should probably also do the signposting to the National Gambling Helpline if anybody needs that. Also, like the Samaritans are well trained in this kind of thing as well. And then to find me, probably the best place is the website. So it's just adambradford.agency, which is the company site. It has a bit about me and where to find me and the work we're doing. So you can find us there.
Amazing. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.